Tony, good morning, brother. We are live.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm better than I deserve.
You and me both.
Yeah. And while we're waiting for folks to jump on, my name is Rich Brown. I'm the co-host, co-founder of the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show, America's leading self-defense podcast. And today I'm joined by Tony Dulaney. And here in just a moment, I'm going to read his impressive bio. But if you're joining us this morning, please let me know where you're watching us from. If you're a coin member of the American Warrior Society, please put your coin number in there. We have some amazing sponsors of the show. You know them by now. They are Century Martial Arts, makers of the Bob XL. Want to take that strike game to the next level? Bob XL is going to help you do that. Matter of fact, if you follow the link in today's show notes, theamericanwarriorshow.com, follow that link. It's going to take you to the Century Martial Arts page where Mike Seeklander goes through an actual muzzle striking workout and shooting on that three-dimensional target that is Bob. We also have amazing sponsors like Appalachian Standard, makers of the CBD products that I use. And hopefully, as I'm talking about our sponsors, please give me a thumbs up or something. Let me know if the audio is okay. I'm using a different mic than I do. Obviously, you can tell that I'm talking to Tony this morning from a cabin in the mountains of East Tennessee. We're on a little family vacation, folks. Let me know if you can hear me okay.
Will says we appear frozen.
I think that's on his end.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately. So let's keep talking about our sponsors. All of them can be easily found on the AmericanWarriorsShow.com. On the right-hand side of the page, we have all the links to the show, to their sponsors. And if you click those links, you'll get the deep discounts we have for watching this morning's show. I also have sponsors like Precision Holsters, makers of the concealed carry belt that I'm using, the Ultra Appendix rig that I'm using, the range holster that I use, the competition line, the Seeklander Signature Series. You can find all of those by clicking on the show notes. And without much further ado, we have Dr. Fuller is on. Says, hello, I can hear you both fine. Fantastic. Mr. Bob Beal is on. Says he can hear us fine. PJ Tahoe, good morning, sir. Audio is fine. Enjoy the cabin. Yes, we are. Guy is on. Scott is on. Please like and hit that share button. We're not going to be on here very long, maybe 30 or 40 minutes. It's going to be kind of a quick show. I just wanted to have Tony on. Tony, of course, is with the FAST Group. That's his company. He's going to talk to us about ham radio communication, how he got into that. He's going to talk to us about freeze-drying food, which is something his company has been engaged in recently. So I think without much further ado, brother, let's talk about preparedness, Tony. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, let's talk about Tony's bio, just so you know who you're talking to this morning. Tony began his career in public service in the mid-1980s, starting as an emergency medical technician for the county's 911 service and becoming an advanced EMT not long after. Along the same time, he became a deputy town marshal for a small department, eventually becoming the assistant training officer for that department and serving in the city and county's combined SWAT and hostage rescue unit as a tactical medical officer. During that time, Tony performed the roles of entry team as well as counter sniper. Tony began studying martial arts in 1970 at the age of 5. He learned under some of the best instructors and practitioners, including Mr. Glenn Keeney, Ross Scott, Bill Superfoot Wallace, and many, many others. His martial arts training spanned several decades and included traditional Okinawan, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, and boxing. Fulfilling a need to serve more than just his community, Tony joined the United States Marine Corps late in 1989. He was honorably discharged of the rank of sergeant in 1994. He continued his work and studies as an EMT as well as a paramedic during and after the Marine Corps. He also became an instructor trainer in basic cardiac life support, instructor for advanced cardiac life support, and basic trauma life support. Tony's been mentoring and instructing firearms for many years. He's also a competitor and has competed in high-power service rifle, long-range precision, IDPA, USPSA 2-gun, as well as 3-gun. Tony was the match director at a local club for high-powered service rifle and long-range precision for 12 years. Currently, Tony resides in Brunswick, Georgia, and is the owner of the FAST Group, LLC, Firearms Services and Training. Once again, Tony, welcome to the show.
Right. Good morning. Good morning, everybody out there. Did you ever have any of the foods that I sent you? Or are you still stockpiling those?
I'm still stockpiling, brother.
Okay.
I'm not wasting that stuff on just a normal breakfast. Tony sent me some freeze-dried food. One of them I cannot wait. I'm almost hoping for the apocalypse so I can eat it. It's biscuits and gravy, which is one of my favorites. Andrew is on, says, morning, Jets from Billings, Montana. Rich's beard looking just as tactical as he is. Look at that thing. Like body armor right there. So tell us, Tony, man, you watched the show I did with Glenn Norling. You watched the shows that we've done with Will. As far as your preparedness, I know you're incredibly into the preparedness scene. Are we missing anything substantive?
I think you guys pretty much got everything. It's such a big issue. There's all sorts of things to think about. Like simply just having a garden. I don't care how small a space you've got, grow something that you can eat. Like you were just talking about, an alternate source of heat, which you don't have at the moment in some relatively nasty weather. Food, there's a lot of ways to keep and store food. Obviously, we make and sell freeze-dried food. We think it's an important part. I also do a lot of canning and just buying, extra things at the store to have several different varieties. Obviously, canning, you have a relatively short shelf life on canned foods compared to freeze-dried foods. With freeze-dried foods, you have to have water. Most of the time, you have to have water. There are a lot of freeze-dried foods, snacks and stuff that we make that eat them instead of potato chips, and it's healthy. So you're muted.
Now the freeze-dried food shelf. I shouldn't be muted. Can you hear me, Tony?
Good now.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the Wi-Fi is getting a little bit of. Like I said, I'm in a cabin up in the Smokies, so I apologize for this morning's show. I'm at the mercy of the Wi-Fi. But you mentioned the freeze-dried foods, Tony. I have read somewhere that 25 years is not uncommon for freeze-dried. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can get it up to 25, 30 years if it's stored. Number one, if it's prepared properly, packaged properly, and stored properly. I don't know if you're familiar with how freeze drying works.
No.
It works from a process called sublimation. So the two things, oxygen and moisture, is what leads to food spoilage. So what sublimation does is during the freeze drying process, it freezes it. You pre-freeze the food, you put it into this vacuum chamber, and it takes it down to 0.06 atmosphere. And at that point, the solid water molecules can go straight from solid to a gas without ever becoming liquid. So it pulls those water molecules out of the food, traps it around the outside of the chamber, and now your food has no water in it. So it was dried under pressure at minus 40 degrees. So once you have that out and it's completely dried, and it takes a long time. A cycle, to run one cycle, is 24 to 30 hours, depending on what type of food, how much moisture it has in it. So it takes that long to do that. But once it's done, it's immediately got to be packaged in certain type of bags, Mylar bags. It has to have oxygen absorbers in them and sealed up immediately. And that oxygen absorber pulls the oxygen out of it, and it will collapse the bag up a little bit, like it's been vacuum sealed, but it's not. It's that little packet inside there that's pulling the air out of it. So absence of the air and the moisture, you have the preservation.
Jared asked a question. He says, we're going off grid in the.
You're froze up there, Rich, but it depends on what you're using as a power source. The thing is with the freeze dryer, number one, they're expensive. This was not a cheap endeavor by any means. We got into freeze drying because we wanted to do this. I wouldn't say that everybody should go out and buy a freeze dryer and you're going to save a bunch of food or money. You're not. I don't. That's my personal opinion. Like I said, they're several $1,000s just for one unit. And running it off grid, it's going to run continuously for 24 to 30, 48 hours, depending what is in there. So you're going to have enough power. And by off grid, I don't know if he's talking about being completely solar or generator, but you got to have something that's going to run that freeze dryer the entire time.
Bob Bill asked a question. What is the typical amount of long-term storage that you see people acquire? 3 months, 6 months, 1 year? What are your thoughts, Tony?
That I see people acquire? About 3 days.
They don't acquire anything, but what should they, I guess?
About 3 days. Yeah. I guess everybody's different. I want to have a year's worth of food in storage, me personally.
Yeah.
Through all the different, and that's for two people, a cat and a dog, So, but what should people realistically want to have? I think at the very least a month.
Yeah.
At the very least. I mean, look what happened during, with COVID and things that are going on now. Supply shortages. You may want to be thinking instead of a month, you might want to be thinking at least 3 months as at a minimum.
No, I agree with you. Let's see. Jared says, thank you, solar and generator, but for the price of a freeze dryer, I can probably buy a whole lot of freeze dried food. Yeah.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. We had someone else ask to see. Johnny King says, how long does grocery canned goods actually last past the expiration date? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Grocery store canned goods?
Yes.
I think, again, if they're stored properly, and you might correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe food has expiration dates on it. They have sell by dates or best by dates. So it's best by this date. And I think they last quite a while longer. I think a lot of that is, like I said, it doesn't say it expires on this date. It says it's best by this date. So people look at it, it's kind of suggestive. Oh, I got to eat it by this date and then go out and buy more. Well, you don't. Again, I think 3 to 5 years. Yeah.
According to the FDA, I mean, like you said, normally they'll come with a 2-year date on there, sell by date, best by date. But as long as they're not rusted, dented, or swelling, really, right, it's relatively indefinitely.
Yeah, and then once you open it, the big thing is the smell test.
Yeah.
Now you can't smell botulism by any means, but it's possible that it could be there. But typically, yeah, like you said, if the can isn't damaged or swelling, rusted, and all that kind of stuff, then it's probably pretty good.
Yeah. Dr. Gordon Botson is on. He says, good morning. Coin number 1688 from Ohio. Bill Armstrong says, not as much as you think, Jared. There is a huge cost difference. Yeah, and I know that Will Wood, who will be on this coming Monday morning to talk about the emerging threat that we see going on with regard to Russia and the Ukraine. We're also working on a China involvement in Africa series. But I wanted to say he just bought one. I think he spent $4,000 on it, Tony.
Mm-hmm. That
sounds about right.
For a small one.
And how big are those? Just to give us a frame of reference.
Bigger than a bread box, smaller than a dryer.
Okay.
for a small unit. So, and then you've also got a vacuum pump, external vacuum pumps that are hooked to them. So they take up quite a bit of space. They're quite heavy. And they're quite big for what small amount of space you have to put food in.
Karen, good morning, Karen. Karen says, can you freeze dry your garden seeds for long term?
Probably, because you can freeze seeds. I put seeds in the freezer all the time and store them in there. So I guess you could. Not sure. Yeah, I guess you could. Probably just have to soak them in some water to get them started.
That's a great question. I'll have to read up on that. Corey says, good morning from Knoxville. Good morning, Corey. Guile says, so for those best before things written are just ploys for us to eat it already and buy more.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, it's funny because with Will has been talking about this a lot. Convert your dollar, which is losing value every single day, into food that you can consume later. You buy a can of beans now, it might cost you 99 cents. 2 years from now, it might be $5. I mean, who knows?
Right.
With inflation being what it is. But also, let's talk about this, man. Long-term storage of bottled water. That's another product that's indefinite now. It will have a best by date on it because a lot of states require that. But please understand, you can store that stuff for long-term use.
Oh, yeah.
Years from now, it might have a little bit of plastic taste, but that's a-okay.
Yeah, and again, you know, it depends on what you store it in. And, you know, if you buy those 5-gallon water cooler jugs or whatever from Sam's Club or wherever they have, and keep them in a, temperature controlled area out of the light, they're going to last forever.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. So with regard to preparedness, I asked your question that started it all off, Tony, was, did we miss anything? I don't think we did. The importance of food, of course, just so people that are joining us now understand, Tony and his company, Fast Group LLC, they produce and sell freeze-dried goods. Tony, for those that are watching, where can they pick up some of your freeze-dried products?
Okay, we will have, and I know the last time that I was on here, we talked about this, that we were having problems with the website. We have just about got that finished up. The web address will be fastgroupfoods, that's plural with an S.com. And we should have a e-commerce site up within the next few days. I would say with less than a week, probably.
Okay.
So just keep going there and checking out for that, and that should be up very soon.
Excellent. Now, one of the things that I've freely admitted was a problem for me is ham radio communications.
Mm-hmm.
I know it. I recognize it. It's always been something that's been sorely lacking in my preparedness acumen. When I was with the Red Cross, I worked with the Aries group,
okay,
which does a phenomenal job of doing a lot of the preparedness. I took the Aries group and we pre-selected certain schools in the event of a major disaster. We went ahead and ran the wire, put some antennas up on top of the school so that we could immediately go in and have our ham radio communications up and running in the communities I was responsible for. So it was at that moment that my eyes began to open, Tony, that right. Holy crap, man, I am way behind the power curve.
And for those of you who don't know, Aries is Amateur Radio Emergency Services. It's all volunteer group of amateur radio operators that work with Red Cross and Salvation Army, the emergency communication centers, and so forth.
Yeah, all the NGOs that are working here, man, the Aries just jumps right in with them and does a phenomenal job. And they're very eager to help, and they're amazingly talented people. Thank you to the 25 folks that are joining us. So tell us how you got into ham radio, and tell us the important, if you would, please, as to what it is and why we need to be involved in it.
I have always, I guess probably since leaving the Marine Corps, always wanted a way of having some type of emergency communications. And the whole reason I got into amateur radio was MCOMs. That's my motivation for it, is to have a way to communicate. And that's the thing. And with amateur radio, that's the thing about it. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, it's, it's obsolete. We don't need it anymore. We've got all other, cell phones and this and that and everything. Well, here's the thing about amateur radio. No matter how antiquated you might think it is, it works when nothing else will. And that's the bottom line. So I've only been licensed for a couple of years. There is so much in the last 20 years that amateur radio has included. There are so many digital platforms, VoIP things you can do over the internet, things you can do. There's so much software has been written to integrate your amateur radio into your computer. There's so many things you can do. And the thing about amateur radio these days is in the early 2000s, I believe, the FCC finally dropped all the code requirements for license. So it used to be you had to be able to do so many words a minute in code per license, depending on what license you were at. And then they dropped it for the technician class back in the 90s, and they finally dropped it for everybody. So there's no code requirement. And I'll guarantee you that's the only reason I was able to get licensed, because there's not a chance that I'm going to be able to do 15 words a minute in Morse code. But that was the simplest form. It is the simplest form, and it's the easiest way of communication. It takes the least amount of power, and you can send it a long distance, and you'll be able to pick Morse code out of the noise if you know how to send and receive Morse code. So it's definitely worth something pursuing. I tried it. I just couldn't get it. So. But still, when nothing else works, as long as you have a power source, an antenna, and a radio, you can communicate worldwide depending on what bands you're on. Now that's different than a little handheld receiver, which I've got behind me here. Those are good for short distance line of sight. And hopefully you can hit a repeater somewhere.
Yeah, and there's several comments I want to get to here, Tony. Yeah. Thank you to the 25 folks watching us. Dr. Fuller says, Rich, have you considered establishing a ham radio network? Let's see. Within American Warrior Society, encourage the members to get their ham licenses and gear in order to chat with one another, but also gets us all in a better place combo-wise. Man, I'm all about that. As a matter of fact, I will throw that out to the members. Hopefully, if someone is willing to pick up that torch and carry it, I don't have the technical acumen to run that group, but if someone within the community wanted to do it, I would cheer and help them in any way possible and become a member of that.
I would help with anything we could with that.
Okay. Bob Beal is on this morning, and he says, for someone new to ham radio, what advice do you have for trying to figure out what kind of transceiver to get?
Typically, probably the vast majority of individuals that get into amateur radio, the first thing they'll get is some type of HT transceiver. And those are going to be UHF and VHF only. And that's because I know we haven't gotten to the stage of licensing, but there's 3 licenses. So the first is technician. Technician license, basically, this is not quite a true statement. Basically, you're going to get VHF and UHF privileges, and that is line of sight. Now you can get further than a handheld, because they do make mobile and base stations that will run UHF and VHF. You can put up an antenna and have a lot more power going to that to reach farther, but it's still line of sight, because VHF and UHF radio waves will not bend in the ionosphere. They go straight to space. So typically they're going to get a handheld transceiver. A lot of people buy these $35 Bofang's. It's not a bad radio, but if you actually are wanting to get into it, I would suggest something a little better, whether it's an ICOM. I like Yaesu. That's what I have. They're more expensive, but they're also a much better radio. So that's typically the first thing that they'll get is a handheld radio.
Yeah, Lorraine is on this morning from Northeast Pennsylvania. Will is on. That's William Province is on. Guile says, I totally forgot about investing in ham radios. Good thing you guys mentioned this. Even simple handheld radios, we should invest in that. Dr. Fuller is in the same boat I am. Tony, he says, I have a pair of Bofang, but have not gotten off my rear end to get my technician's license. Yeah, that's precisely where I am. I got the radios, and they're sitting probably in the box somewhere. I just haven't got off my rear end and made it happen, but I need to. And my brother...
I'm gonna tell you what. It sounds and it looks a lot more intimidating than what it actually is to get your license. You can get books. You can get two of the good ones. I like it. One comes from the ARRL, which that is the big organization that represents amateur radios. They're kind of our voice to the FCC, and they put out a ton of good training material. Gordon West is another good book, but one of the best things is hamstudy.org is a free app to download on your computer, and it's kind of gotten to a different place these days. Used to, you had to study. And for instance, there's 423 questions in the technician pool for your first license. 423 questions. You're going to get on your test 35 of those. So, but you have no idea what 35 you're going to get. Mm-hmm. So what it is the books and the apps. The question pool is public information. It's not hidden like it used to be. So what a lot of studying does now is you're studying for a test. You're going to learn a little bit about electricity, a little bit about, math and Ohm's law and Watt's law, how to figure this and that. But you're really studying for the test. And once you pass your test, that's when you really start learning, because you start getting involved in doing it. You can program your radios you go on repeaterbook.com and find the repeaters in your area and what the frequencies are, what the offset is, and you can listen to your radios and listen. Anybody can listen to amateur radio, but you can't transmit unless you are licensed, and it is a federal license. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I want to get to Jeff's question because I think it's incredibly important. Is there a way that you know of to protect your radio from EMP? I mean, is it throw it in a Faraday bag or no?
There's a lot of talk about that, and a lot of people say that, you need a subtype of a Faraday bag or Faraday cage. There's other people that say that a lot of this EMP information going around is a myth. I don't have a definitive answer on any of that. I don't have any of that. People say you can put them in, as long as they're isolated and they're in an ammo box or a metal trash can, which I don't know if anybody even sells metal trash cans these days anymore. But if you have it in there and it's completely insulated from what's inside, it may or may not work. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have any equipment to test and hope it works.
Yeah. Jared said studying for the ham radio test is the fastest way to go to sleep at night.
Yeah, it can be. There's a lot of good stuff on YouTube. Actually, I think it's W4EEY, if I'm not mistaken. They actually they're out of North or South Carolina. They actually taught all three classes. Actually had a classroom. People came. and they filmed it, and all of that's on YouTube. So you can basically go to class by watching their videos on YouTube. It's some good information. The thing you have to realize also is that the question pool changes every 4 years. So I'm not sure. I think 2023, maybe when the technician pool changes. Also, the FCC they haven't instituted it yet. They just approved testing. Everything used to be free. The only thing you would pay is somewhere between around $10-12 for the processing fee of going to physically take a test, and all the volunteer examiners that have to be there present, do the grading, all the stuff they got to do. Now the FCC is going to charge $35 for every test or upgrade that you do, which people have their opinions. Amateur radio is not cheap by any means. And a couple of the rules and regs. Number one, you cannot make money using amateur radio. The only thing you can get compensated for is if you teach a class. But you cannot make money. You cannot use amateur radio for business purposes. That, again, the word they use is pecuniary, which basically means you cannot receive compensation. So, and again, that's when you were with Red Cross. That's why Aries came in.
Yep.
You could not have used amateur radio in your duties because I assume you were a paid position, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So even if you had your license, if you got on that radio, it would be illegal because you're getting compensated, and now you're on amateur. Even though it's an emergency, whatever you're doing, you cannot use amateur radio in the line of your duties if you're getting compensated.
Yep.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be amateur.
Exactly. Bill says Repeater Book has an app as well.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was saying earlier. You can go into Repeater Book and put in your location, find the repeaters in your area, program everything into it. You can listen to what's going on in your area. It's actually kind of a good way to get used to it.
Can't you talk across them too as well?
Well, not until you're licensed.
Well, no. I mean, once you have your license, you can use the repeaters to extend the link. Right.
Yeah. Again, it's line of sight. So most all repeaters are either 2 meter or 70 centimeter, which is the two bands, UHF and VHF, that basically you're going to have voice privileges as a technician. So yeah, what repeaters do is hopefully your radio can hit the repeater. The repeater simultaneously broadcasts that out at a much higher strength, and an antenna is usually in a high location. So that's how you're able to talk. And if repeaters are linked, you can talk longer distances. Like in Georgia, they have what's called the Georgia Conference, and there's repeaters linked all throughout the state. So if I hit, and I can't hit my local repeater with just the antenna on my handheld radio. I actually had to build a quarter wave ground plane, and I threw a string over in the tree and put the antenna up in a tree. And with that antenna, I can go a long ways.
Now, I'm going to show my ignorance here, Tony. So would it be possible for me in East Tennessee to talk to you in Brunswick, Georgia with a technician license?
Doubtful, no. No, because VHF and UHF is, like I said, line of sight, short distance. I doubt that there are any repeaters linked all the way between you and I.
Okay.
With a general license, absolutely. Because that opens up HF. And HF bounces. HF high frequency radio waves bend off the atmosphere, the ionosphere. During the day, a lot of that stuff is absorbed through the layers. At night, those layers come together, some disappear. And you can go from, like the antenna that I have, that I built, and I built it out of 18 gauge lamp cord that I got from Lowe's. Got a spool of lamp cord that's made to wire your lamps with and plug them into the wall. I cut that and I made a resonant antenna for 40 meters. On 40 meters during the daytime, I can get just about anywhere east of the Mississippi. I don't have amplifiers or anything like that, so I don't think that some of the folks that I can hear would be able to hear me. But I've talked to people. I've made contacts in Costa Rica. I've made contacts in Scotland. I've made contacts in Slovenia. It just all depends on band conditions and the time. Yeah. So you can go from a 500 to 600 mile range to, a 5,000 mile range just because the atmosphere and things change.
And Bob wants to know, what HF radio do you have, Tony?
I have, and it's right here behind me. My HF radio is a Yaesu 857D. It's a radio that's no longer in production. I bought this used, but it's a great radio, and it's all mode. So it has HF, UHF, and VHF. I think the one that they have out now would be the FT 991A, I think, is also an all mode radio. And you can get just HF radios, but I can use this as a base station. I also have it hooked up to go into my truck. I have an antenna that's ran. I've run the power wires, the power cords and everything. So I can take this and go straight from the box, plug it into the truck, and head down the road.
Andrew says, Rich, EMP shield is supposed to be designed to shield anything from your vehicle, home, radio, generator, etc. Just heard of it a couple months ago myself. Here's the link. There you go. Thank you very much, Andrew.
I've heard of that. I haven't really checked into to what that is, and I probably should.
So obviously, Tony, hopefully folks that are listening this morning realize that that ham radio is something that, if from the preparedness side of the house, we need to be investing in, we need to be training on, we need to be getting our license now while we're in that blue sky environment, and be more prepared, because I definitely, speaking for myself, I am way behind the power curve, and I'm going to get it fixed here.
Yeah. Something else I was going to bring up. There's a lot of fun things you can do with that Bofang radio. I built what's called a Yagi, a 2-element, 2-meter and 5-element 70 centimeter Yagi antenna on a dowel rod. And with that, I hook up to my Yaesu FT70D radio, my handheld radio, which is a 5-watt radio, same as what your Bofangs are. And you can do this with your Bofangs too. And I've communicated with this International Space Station.
Wow.
And I've worked other satellites. There's a lot of satellites out there. In December, of course, the International Space Station has amateur radio. They have VHF, UHF radios on board. They also just recently last year activated a repeater. So depending on what mode they're in, as the space station goes overhead somewhere in your area, everybody's on there trying to make contacts with somebody. It acts as a repeater, just like a repeater in your area would work, and people are making contacts that way. Last month, they did what's called a slow scan TV. And what slow scan TV is, excuse me, it's not really television, but what it is they're sending pictures through digital means, and then you're picking it up analog. Then you have a program on your phone or your computer, and it takes all that noise and it turns it into a picture on your screen. I was able to get 6 out of the 12 with my Yagi antenna on a dowel rod. I call it a Yagi on a stick, and plugged into my radio. And then as it's going over and you pick up that signal, I have my cell phone next to the radio, which is recording all the noise. Then I take the noise to the tablet and play it when I run the program, and it brings up the pictures.
Wow, that is so cool. A
Takes
couple things I want to hit on, Tony, before I let you go, sir. Is one is Jared. It says, do you want to address crossband?
And what I know what crossband is. I mean, it have crossband repeaters, but it's a lot of technical stuff that I probably not qualified to talk about. So if he's got something else he wants to address or bring up, why, ask away.
Jeff says, can you use a VHF antenna to switch back and forth?
Back and forth to what? VHF antennas is just for that. Most antennas are cut to a specific frequency. It's called a resonant antenna. You can have multi-band antennas. That's usually on the HF side, and then you've got tuners that will turn you. You're building antennas with bound transformers and different things and stuff like that. But you can make resonant antennas relative. I've made all mine. My 40 meter, I've got an inverted V dipole that's up about 21 feet on one of the fiberglass painters extending poles. So it's like 23 feet long. I've got it 2 foot in the ground. So the feed point center line of my dipole is up 21 feet in the air. And then each of the transmitting legs come down at about a 45-degree angle. It's called an inverted V dipole, and it's cut to 40 meters. So right now, I can get on 40 meters. I can also get on 15 meters because it's the third harmonic of that. So with the tuner, I can get the SWR down to tune into 2 of those frequencies, and that's all I have up at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go over a couple of comments here. Don says the biggest limiter to beginner is the handheld radio is their antenna. Usually it's a stubby rubber duck. Spending an extra $20 and getting a better antenna will significantly boost the range you can transmit. Would you agree with that?
That's absolutely true. And in fact, I did the first thing, and it's called a rubber duck, the antenna that comes with your handheld. I took the original off, and I bought the one that I have on there, a diamond, and it didn't work any better. And, this is a pretty good, diamonds are pretty good antennas. And in my area where, we do have a lot of trees, and the repeater, the main repeater for our area is way up on the bridge, City Lanier Bridge. And I can't hit it with the antenna that's on my radio. That's why I had to build the quarter wave ground plane. I know that doesn't mean much to anybody right now, but you can basically make that out of a coat hanger or a few coat hangers and a connector and some coax feed line, and screw that into my antenna, and I can hit all sorts of stuff around here. So, and like I said, it's up about 12, 14 feet in a tree that is just being held up with some tarred bank line string that I've tied to it.
Yeah.
And so once it gets up there, and again, like the Yagi antenna that I built to work satellites to the space station. There's also, you can make, you know what ladder line or window line is? If you think about back when we used to have an antenna for our television, and that antenna cable that came down and went into the house had 2 strands, and then it was cut out, looked like windows up and down, or that's ladder line. You can take one of those and you can make what's called a ladder line J-pole antenna. It's all for 2 meters, and that can be portable. I have one that I made. I've got a string tied to it, and a long string. You can wrap a rock around it, tie a rock off, and throw it to a tree and hoist it up. And it's height and the quality of the antenna is your friend.
Dr. Fuller says, sounds like we need a commo section in the AWS training vault Seems like there's an awful lot of knowledge about hams here amongst the membership. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to post, and if you're a member of the American Warrior Society and you're watching and listening to this, check out the closed group, man. I'm going to start a discussion thread here. We need to get ourselves squared away. And I think
want to ask something too. If anybody that's listening right now, if you are a licensed ham, throw your call sign out there in the comments if you would. For anybody that cares, mine is KO4ERK or Kilo Oscar 4 Echo Romeo Kilo.
Say your call sign again.
Kilo Oscar 4 Echo Romeo Kilo.
Okay, I just put it up there. Johnny says my knowledge was limited to country or city till this morning. Yeah, Jared has thrown his up there. Don has thrown his up there. Bob. Yeah, I don't know if Taylor, I don't think he's watching this morning. I know he is also an operator. So, yeah, so we need to get on this, Tony, and
yeah, hopefully any of those guys that are on there work 40 meters. We need to find a time where we might try to be able to get a little net set up or between or amongst ourselves.
Yeah, we definitely need to do that. Tony, where can people find you? Where can they pick up your freeze-dried food? Where can they take some training with you? Tell us more about where they can find you.
Like I said, our freeze-dried food e-commerce page is going to be up. It'll be fastgroupfoods.com. The other way is Facebook is fastgroup75. Get the page on Facebook. All the information is there. You can go to fastgroupllc.com. Not sure what the state of, we are social media challenged. We don't keep up with it nearly as much as what we need to, but there's two of us that run this and do all the stuff that we do, from all the gunsmithing and manufacturing and restoring. And I know you and Mike are big Kydex guys, but I build custom leather holsters, belts, magazine pouches. I just like leather. I wore Kydex for a lot of years, but leather is it's a little thicker, takes up a little bit more room, but to me it's just so much more comfortable. In fact, I'm wearing the first inside the waistband appendix holster, leather holster that I made several years ago. It's the first prototype holster I made, and I wear it every day now for about 3 years.
Where can we see some of your leather stuff at, Tony?
There should be some stuff on the Facebook business page, Fast Group 75, or give me 1 second. Here is an outside the waistband. Get this in front of the camera.
Very nice.
All of this is handmade. All of it is made by me from start to finish. Doesn't pay for itself by any means because it takes a lot longer to, that's it. Inside the waistband, it's basically the same thing that I'm wearing right now.
Very nice. I'll have to get with you offline about that.
Yeah.
Dr. Gordon Botson asked a great question here. He says, if you and Rich can't talk to each other, of course, you're on the coast in Georgia and I'm here in East Tennessee, how do we set up a network of American Warrior Society members?
Rich has to get licensed to be at least a general class license and be on HF. HF, even like on 40 meters that I work primarily, is still a good 500 to 600 miles. I can get everybody from, I talk to people in Canada, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Tennessee is no problem. In fact, there's a 40 meter net that happens every day of the year from 8 to 1 o'clock. It's 5 hours long, and it's on frequency of 7251. It's called South Cars, which is South Coastal Amateur Radio Service. And they change out net controllers every day. One of the net controllers sometimes is in West Virginia that I can hear and be able to participate in the net. And basically, it's nothing but a weather net. People check in, where, give them their call sign, where they're at, what their temperature, what their clouds, sky conditions, is it rain and snow? And so it's basically a weather net. It's what it was set up to be. So I can hear people, there's net controllers. There's a gentleman that, and I don't remember his call sign or his name, but I do remember that he checks in from Crossville, Tennessee.
Really? Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
To answer the question, to have any type of net like this is you're going to have to be at least a general class license and have an HF radio.
Yep. And that's exactly what Jared just said. Mm-hmm. And that's what we need. That's what Rich Brand will have to do, because I'm committed to getting this one area that I am terribly lacking on preparedness. We're going to get it squared away. Andrew says, good stuff, gents. Glad I finally got to watch and listen in. Recently switched to days from the graveyard shift. Definitely looking forward to watching many more. Rich, been listening to you on the podcast for over a year now, as often as I can at work. Thank you for the invaluable information, brother. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for being on. Tony, any parting things for everybody this morning?
No, I think that's it. I didn't realize that there were as many licensed amateur operators in the group that there is. Hopefully, we can get something together. Hopefully, the American Warrior Society can get this thing going a little bit. You can get your, because we're talking about preparedness, and I think you were kind of prompting me, hey, is there anything we left out? And it's like, yeah, amateur radio, emergency communications was one thing you left out, and I didn't even think of it. But
well, we touched on it. I said, communications.
Yeah.
Whether that's your cell phone or ham radios or Bafang, but in all truthfulness, I just suck at this. So
and a lot of people, and I see this stuff in. It's one thing I did want to touch on is I see a lot of it in these groups and forums of people. There's survivalists, preppers, and so forth. And I hate the term prepper, because who isn't? If you carry a handgun, you're a prepper, right? You're preparing for an unknown situation to occur.
Yep.
Now you don't go all, what was the guy's name? Gruber from the movie Tremors.
Yeah.
But having extra food, well, that's preparing for whatever. So I hate that term, but a lot of these guys will get on there and they'll buy these Bofang radios or a set of them, and it's like, yeah, man, I've got comms and da-da-da. It's like, are you licensed? Who's, something, the crap hits the rotating oscillator, who's going to be out there to, come and find me or whatever. Well, that's not the point, because first of all, that Bofang is going to get you about a block away. You're going to be able to talk to your buddy down the block. That's about it. Unless you can hit a repeater. And if everything's going bad, repeater's probably not working.
Yeah.
So what's it going to do? It's going to get you line of sight, maybe 10 miles if you got open land. Who are you going to talk to? Because amateur radio operators are going to be on the air, and they're not going to be talking to you. If you don't have a call sign, you don't know what you're doing. Unless there is a true bona fide absolute emergency, you're going to be ignored. You're not going to have any comms. The best you're going to be able to do is listen, and that's not a bad thing. Listening is intel, right? Hearing what's going on. So get your license, and my suggestion is get at least your general. For those who don't know, there's 3 levels: technician, general, and extra. Okay, and you can't skip. You've got to take one before the other. However, you can go in and sit down and test for all 3 as long as you pass them. You take the technician, you pass it, and say, you want to take the general? Sure. You sit down, you pass it. You want to take extra? Sure. Doesn't cost you any more. You can become an extra all in one day. And when I tested for my general, there was a woman in my testing that did that, and she passed all 3.
Wow.
I didn't do it that way. But once you start, don't quit. If you're going to get your license, I suggest getting the material for tech and general, and study everything for the tech. Depending on how much time and knowledge and stuff that you have. If you go take the technician's license, as soon as you're done, start studying for your general and take that within a couple of weeks. No more than a month. Study and get at least your general. Then you've got voice privileges on HF throughout all of the amateur radio bands. So that would be my advice. At least get your general as soon as you go. Don't get your general or get your tech and go, all right, let's deal with this and play with this for a while and worry about general later. Now get your general, even if you don't mess with HF for a while. I had my general, and the only thing I had was my handheld radio for a year.
Yeah.
Until I was able to come across and then save the money to get the radio setup that I did and build the antenna. So get your general because it's in your mind. All that knowledge is in your mind. And, once you pick a lane basically of how you're going to go, like for me, it was all about, I wasn't into or wanting to do a lot of the digital stuff and, having your shack set up with computers and monitors and 12 different radios. I just wanted portable emergency comms, and which is what I have. Right next to my radio, this box is a solar battery box, and that's what powers my radio. If people don't know, radios are 12 volt. You don't buy a radio, plug it into the wall. They run off of 12 volts. So if you have if you're going to have a base station, have your radio in your house, you're going to have a power supply that plugs into the wall and converts AC to 12 volts DC to run your radio. And then you can get a amplifier, and you can as much disposable income as you have, you can spend it in amateur radio. That was not my intention. My intention was to have HF communications as portable as it can be. I've got one small little solar panel that sits up on top of the roof outside the porch, connected to the battery box. Battery box is connected to the radio, and the radio is connected to my my antenna outside that I made out of lamp cord and a painter's extension pole. So I can take all of that down, relatively easy, roll it all up, and go set it up in the woods somewhere and still have that communication. But in order to really have that, you've got to be a general class license.
Yeah, I think you just hit my 2022 resolution, man, and that is general technician license, and learn all I can about HF, be as mobile as I possibly can on my communications, because I want to take our American Warrior Sighted community of self-defense and preparedness-minded people and be able to talk to all you guys. So that's what I'm going to do. It's going to take a few months, but I'm going to get there, Tony.
Yeah, good. Start looking around for, you probably got, you make the big bucks, so you can go out and buy a nice, Yaesu 991A right off the shelf for $1,500 or whatever, an ICOM 7100, something like that. But for everybody else, start looking around for, find. And another thing, here's another thing I want to suggest to everybody. There is an amateur radio.
Tell us one more time where we can find your freeze-dried products, your leather products, training, etc.
Fast Group LLC.com and fastgroupfoods.com.
Thanks to everybody that joined us this morning and that will listen to the replays, man. Tony, we're going to have to do this again, brother, and dig in, maybe just do a specific, because this morning we talked about freeze-dried foods, we talked about preparedness, we talked about the radios. Maybe we do another show specific to ham, and you just walk us through step by step, do a dry erase board like Glenn Beck, and go into a little deeper.
Yeah. I'm not an expert by any means, but whatever I can share, I will.
All right. Thanks for being on today, guys. Be safe out there, and remember, the fight is coming. Be ready.